Hi, everyone. 4 days before the celebration of a birthday that never was. Jesus' birthday, not December 25, a pagan holiday that many Christians celebrate every single year. They're worshiping actually something very different from Jesus. And many even know that they're doing it. But, yeah, the majority of people are go along to get along. And unfortunately, the majority of people do not stand on principle. What they do is they speak all of those wonderful values that they don't live. So why not celebrate a birthday that never was? The individual is directly tied to the nightmare that we are living. I know that an awful lot of people don't even want to consider the connection between how they behave in the world and what they do and this nightmare that we're living. This and it's John Whitehead's commentary that I do want to recommend to all of you. If you have not checked out the Rutherford Institute and especially John Whitehead's commentaries, then please click on the link below this video and come over here and check them out, because John Whitehead's commentaries are right on, give a lot of detail of what we are living. And many also hit on why we are living it. The why? Because we failed to fight evil. Now, I'm not talking about every individual, but I am talking about the vast majority. So when you don't fight evil, we all know that evil flourishes. Now, so many, millions upon millions upon millions upon millions around the world are suffering the consequences, and many are within our own communities. And every day we see evil destroying life. And we have an awful lot of people who do believe they're good, an awful lot of people with faith, an awful lot of people who believe they're living a spiritual life, when nothing could be further from the truth. And I do agree, this is a spiritual war, which means that every one of us has to be doing the work necessary to bring us to a spiritual condition. And that spiritual condition is about living the principles that you speak, not just speaking them. Examples: those who are Christian, you live every single day trying your hardest to emulate, not emulate, emulate the life of Jesus. And unfortunately, we don't see very many people doing that. So this commentary here, the child that Christmas forgot, how would Jesus fare in the American police state? We're living the American police state because we speak a lot of what we ostensibly value. We think that we're good, decent people. We speak principles that we don't live. It's in the living that brings about a manifestation. So evil has manifested big time. How could that be possible? If the vast majority of a people in any society are good, moral people. They may think they are. But the only way to actually be moral is to live moral. Live it. Not think it, not speak it, but live it on a daily basis until that moral core literally becomes the center of your life. And it then takes over, and you then are just living that moral life. And I do know that whenever I say things like this, that there really is a connection between how we live our lives and the nightmare that we are living. I know that people get angry, but if you're not seeing that connection, you may speak a lot about yourself. You may think a whole lot of great things about yourself, but it's not true. It's not true. The disconnect between what we think and what we do is so great in our society. And it has allowed this manifestation. When so many Christians are celebrating Jesus' birthday on December 25th, knowing that it's a pagan holiday, they go along to get along with their families, with their friends. They show up. Oh, they don't really want to be celebrating. They're just showing up because they don't want conflict. You perpetuate the evil that is being celebrated. You're joining in. Look, Roman Empire, police state in its own right, had ordered that a census be conducted. Joseph and his pregnant wife, Mary, traveled to the little town of Bethlehem so that they could be counted. There being no room for the couple at the inns, they stayed at a stable. Mary gave birth to Jesus, warned that the government planned to kill the baby. Jesus' family fled to Egypt until it was safe to return to their native land. What if Jesus was born 2,000 years later at this moment in time? I immediately thought when I was reading this article that most Christians wouldn't even recognize Jesus. And that most Christians would not do a thing to help him when the American police state began treating Jesus like the Roman Empire, the Roman police state did. They would just go on about their business. And that is very sad. But that really does come from living a pretense. It is a spiritual war, which means every individual needs on a daily basis to strengthen that moral core until it gets to a point where they are living what they speak. They've become integrated souls. What kind of reception would Jesus and his family be given? Would we recognize the Christ child's humanity, let alone his divinity? Would we treat him any differently than he was treated by the Roman Empire? Modern day church has largely shied away from applying Jesus' teachings to modern problems. Doesn't matter if it's church, the church-going Christians, or the non-church-going Christians. Bringing and applying Jesus' teachings, bringing them into one's life, and acting on them, living those teachings, is really, what Christians should be doing if they label themselves a Christian. But that doesn't take place in a whole lot of Christians. And no, I don't hate Christians. I have a real problem with hypocrisy. I also have a real problem when people don't listen to what people say. So you don't have to leave a comment claiming I hate Christians, because what you really shouldn't be. You reveal that there's something wrong with you. I do not hate Christians. I have tremendous respect for Christians who take their Christianity seriously, who try every day to live as Jesus did. Not just throw a label on themselves for their own self-centered purposes, which is, hey, I'm Christian, which means I'm good. Well, it sure doesn't work with me, but just to say that you're Christian and then live a satanic lifestyle, which is what most Christians do, that's why we're living this nightmare. Giving in, being a cog in the evil system's wheel. That's why we're living this nightmare. Not speaking out about the evil, not fighting that evil. That's why we're living this nightmare. And yes, I think if Jesus was born and lived now, a whole lot of Christians would actually want to kill him, because he'd be speaking words that you would not want to hear. He'd be calling you out for your hypocrisy. Jesus grew into a preacher, an itinerant preacher, and revolutionary activist. He acted. Who not only died challenging the police state of his day, but spent his adult life speaking truth to power, challenging the status quo of his day, and pushing back against the abuses of the Roman Empire. And there are so many Christians, because I get the comments, this is just a temporary world, like, God made a mistake and dumped you here, to live out a life that, you have completely disassociated yourself from, which Well, you haven't, because you're a cog in the evil system's wheel. All of these delusions that people manufacture, it's all about living their comfortable life. It's all a self-centered manufacturing of a delusion that somehow you've cemented in your brain as a belief that you don't have to do anything here. And, well, Jesus is going to come back and make everything right again, so you don't have to do anything. That, to me, is an extraordinary delusion. Because you don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be, someone who's even read the Bible. We know about, and everybody pretty much knows about, Jesus and how he lived. So, yeah, there's a profound disconnect within the Christian community with people who have just slapped a label on their head. And that's it. That's all they have to do. Have their faith, have their belief, but how they behave in the world, how they live their life, is antithetical to Jesus, how he lived. Despite the popularity of the phrase, "What would Jesus do?" in Christian circles, there remains a disconnect in the modern church between the teachings of Christ and the suffering of what Jesus in Matthew refers to. Matthew 25. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." So, what happened here? 2019. Families falling apart. Virtually everybody in this country living a pretense, hiding their true selves, even from their own self. Materialism is really what people practice. Speaking what they don't live. Homelessness has exploded. The police state has manifested. And they're writing laws to make illegal a criminal offense to help people. So what's going on here? How can that manifest when we do have so many Christians? Still, the largest majority, the largest percentage of the American population, Christians. What happened? What happened that people are losing their homes and losing their jobs? They can't find other work, and they're judged as being lazy and not helped by even their own family. Could this have happened in what many Christians have said this nation is, a Christian nation? Could it have happened if the majority of Christians were real and not just speaking, hey, I'm Christian? If the majority of Christians had a strong moral core and actually lived a spiritual life, could it have happened? I say no, it could not have happened. So something is wrong with the individuals in the aggregate. And how do you set things right? The individual needs to do work on themselves to develop that moral core and get it really strong so it will not bend. You live the principles. You get to a point on that spiritual journey, if you're actually, on that road, doing that work, you get to a point where those principles take over. That moral core in you does not allow you anymore to do what you know is wrong and then justify it in your own head. It does not allow you to go along to get along. It doesn't allow you to be a cog in the wheel, helping to spread the evil that is destroying life. So, when people claim it's a spiritual war, I don't think they even think about what that means. Most of them. It means they need to be doing things on a daily basis that strengthens their own moral core. Because that's the only way that you can possibly manifest good in a society. If the people are good, you got good. If the people are not good, you got this, what we are living. There is no gray zone. Jesus was unequivocal about his views on many things, not the least of which was charity, compassion, war, tyranny, love. Born into a police state not unlike the growing menace of the American police state. When he grew up, he had powerful, profound things to say, things that would change how we view people, alter government policies, and change the world. Blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers, love your enemies, are just a few examples of his most profound and revolutionary teachings. When confronted by those in authority, Jesus did not shy away from speaking truth to power. Indeed, his teachings undermined the political and religious establishment of his day. It cost him his life. He was eventually crucified as a warning to others not to challenge the powers that be. So, had Jesus Jesus. Cheez-Its. No, wait, Jesus. Had Jesus been born in the era of the American police state, rather than traveling to Bethlehem for a census, Jesus' parents would have been mailed a 28-page American Community Survey, a mandatory government questionnaire documenting habits, household, inhabitants, work schedule, how many toilets are in your home, etc. And if they did not fill out that census, they were at risk of getting slapped with a $5,000 fine. Jesus might have been born at home instead of a manger, rather than wise men and shepherds bringing gifts. However, the baby's parents might have been forced to ward off visits from state social workers intent on prosecuting them for a home birth. One couple in Washington had 3 children. They were all removed because the state social services objected to the 2 youngest being birthed in an unassisted home delivery. And I have witnessed over and over and over again Americans not doing a thing in their own communities when these kinds of events take place. Very few show up to support and fight against this evil. And that's why we're living this nightmare. Had Jesus been born in a hospital, his blood and DNA would have been taken without his parents' knowledge and used, stored in a government biobank. And he would have been shot with a vaccine immediately. That vaccine that prevents hepatitis, from drug use, intravenous, or having sex. That's what the vaccine is. That's shot into the infant when it is born. Welcome to planet Earth. Jesus would have been drilled in lessons had he been, born at this time and forced to attend a indoctrination center called public schools. He would have been drilled in lessons of compliance and obedience to government authorities while learning little about his own rights. Had he been daring enough to speak out against injustice while in school, he might have been tasered, beaten by a school resource officer, suspended under a school zero tolerance policy. Had Jesus disappeared for a few hours, let alone days, as a 12-year-old, his parents would have been handcuffed, arrested, and jailed for parental negligence. Parents across the country have been arrested for far less offenses, such as allowing their children to walk to the park and play in their front yard alone. 12-year-olds. My God, at 12. I was. Yeah. Life has changed. And the only way that we could have gotten here is with our consent, our silence, our inactivity, our self-centered me, me, me. Me, me, me first. Jesus, his movements, personal data, biometrics, would have been documented, tracked, monitored, and filed by governmental agencies and corporations like Google and Microsoft. 95% of school districts share their student records with outside companies. And a whole lot of schools are monitoring their kids, their students, after school, 24/7, monitoring their social media behaviors. They're watching them on the internet. And a whole lot of parents don't care. From the moment Jesus made contact with an extremist, such as John the Baptist, he would have been flagged for surveillance because of his association with a prominent activist. Peaceful or otherwise, Jesus' anti-government views would certainly have resulted in him being labeled a domestic extremist. While traveling from community to community, Jesus might have been reported to government officials as suspicious, reported by his own Christians. See something, say something. Jesus might have found himself threatened with arrest for daring to live off the grid or sleeping outside. The number of cities that have resorted to criminalizing homelessness by enacting bans on camping, sleeping in vehicles, loitering, begging in public has doubled. And yes, a whole lot of Christians have an awful lot to say about how they do not want any of these homeless people in their neighborhood, and they don't even want to look at them. Jesus might have had government spies planted among his followers to monitor his activities, report on his movements, and entrap him in breaking the law. And such Judases, and wow, are there so many today, often receive hefty paychecks from the government for their work as a cog in the wheel, keeping the evil system destroying people. Had Jesus used the internet to spread his radical message of peace and love, he might have found his blog infiltrated by government spies, attempting to undermine his integrity, discredit him, or plant incriminating information online about him. At the very least, he would have had his website hacked and his email monitored. It's interesting how many subscribers of mine I get comments, and I have seen comments underneath, other videos of on different channels, how they rip apart people who they don't like or they claim is a shill with no evidence. Those who are fighting the evil, speaking out against the evil, they'll rip them to shreds. And they do it by lying about them. Either they're lying outright, or they don't know their own self. They have no control over their own thinking because they've never really did the work to get control of their thinking, to understand that, I just made a presumption about somebody and it's not fact. So because it's not fact, I'm not going to spit it out because, well, that's a very wrong thing to do. Instead, they manufacture presumptions all the time, spit them out in public. It's a lie. They may not know, because they have no awareness of their own self, that it's a lie, but it's a lie. And wow, the number of Christians who lie, it's staggering. So they're not Christian, they just throw that label on themselves. Doesn't matter what they believe. Look, you lie. I'm not saying that one is not a Christian if they lie, but I'm talking about behaviors that are consistent. They don't clear them up. They don't do any work. They claim they're not lying when they are lying. They hurt people, but they don't care. They don't do anything to stop lying. They don't do the work necessary to have an awareness of their own self in the world, what they say, how they think, how they're behaving, and the effect that they have in their communities, the effect on their friends and family and yada, yada, yada. They don't do any of that work. Well, a lot of it has to do with their belief. And belief is, it is one of those things that prevents thinking. It stops thinking. So, as long as they have their belief, whatever it may be, that's all they need. It's a big one of the reasons we're living this nightmare. Had Jesus attempted to feed large crowds of people, he would have been threatened with arrest for violating various ordinances. Yes, a 90-year-old in Florida, feeding the homeless on the beach, was arrested. How can that be if Americans are good people? We have to get the connection between how we live our life and the ripple effect of that. Then take your own life and how you live it, and then open it up and bring in that aggregate. And you can see everybody in your community pretty much is living the exact same way. That's how evil manifests. Had Jesus used the internet to spread his radical message of peace and love, he might have found his blog. Yes, infiltrated by government spies, I read that. Had Jesus spoken publicly about his 40 days in the desert and his conversations with the devil, he might have been labeled mentally ill, detained in a psych ward against his will, against mandatory and voluntary psychiatric admission, and held, no access to friends and family. One Virginia man was arrested, strip searched, handcuffed to a table, diagnosed as having mental health issues, and locked up for 5 days in a mental health facility against his will because he had slurred speech and unsteady gait. Without a doubt, had Jesus attempted to overturn tables in a Jewish temple and rage against the materialism of religious institutions, and it ain't just the synagogue. Oh, materialism. In the Christian church, he would have been charged with a hate crime. 45 states and the federal government have hate crime laws on the books. Had anyone reported Jesus to the police as being potentially dangerous, he might have found himself confronted, killed by police officers, or just accused of being non-compliant when he was compliant. Rather than having armed guards capture Jesus in a public place, government officials would have ordered a SWAT team carried out on a raid on Jesus and his followers, complete with flashbang grenades and military equipment. Upwards of 80,000 SWAT team raids carried out every year here in the good old US of A. Freest country in the world. many on unsuspecting Americans who had no defense. Instead of being detained by Roman guards, Jesus might have been made to disappear into a secret government detention center where he would be interrogated, tortured, and subjected to all manner of abuses. And that is happening here in the US of A. We've got a whole lot of political dissidents in jail, in solitary confinement. How could that happen? It only happens when you have the vast majority sticking their head in the sand. Because they want to be happy and they want to be comfortable. So I ain't looking and I ain't doing anything different. Chicago disappeared 7,000 people in a secret off-the-books interrogation warehouse. Charged with treason and labeled a domestic terrorist, Jesus might have been sentenced to a life term in a private prison where he would have been forced to provide slave labor for corporations or put to death. And I can't think of one Christian who would stand, support, and fight for him. Because I've known a lot of people who have ended up, I've known them, I've known some in real life, but I've known many more in this cyber world of ours that have been, the truth tellers, the fighting against the evil, the speaking out. And it's really amazing because when they encounter the state coming upon them or encounter really bad circumstances, almost no one shows up to help them. Yeah. Whether Jesus had been born in our modern age or his own, he still would have died at the hands of a police state. That baby in the manger grew up to be a man who did not turn away from evil, but instead spoke out against it. And we must do no less. Doesn't matter, Christian or not. The human being has choices throughout his or her lifetime to make choices about how they're living. And morality is black and white. There's no gray zone. And is anybody perfect? No. No. But when you falter, you take responsibility and you keep up the practice, the spiritual practice of doing what is right every given day, every given moment. And if you're not doing that, then you're not even on a spiritual road. It is a spiritual war. Why do I post these videos? Because I want so much to see some change. And It inspires me to be around people who are working on themselves. It inspires me, those comments that I get when people say, I was this, but now I'm that, and I am working on myself. That's what helps me go on. And yes, every single year, I do get more and more tired of watching the Americans around me or in the cyber world who truly are lost and don't want to change anything. They won't change themselves, and everything is about them. There's a lot of people, a whole lot of people suffering. More and more. The number gets bigger every single day. If this is a Christian nation, that wouldn't be the case. That would not be the case.